Alright, hello. Welcome to the Eden8 podcast. I haven't done one of these in a while. Oops. But today I just wanted to talk about something that came to my mind. It's not very philosophical, it's just something I find really fascinating. Maybe I can tie some philosophy into it. So, I just wanted to talk about the World of Warcraft Corrupted Blood incident. So I'll go into more detail about it. So it basically happened in 2005, the 13th of September, and Blizzard, the company who owns World of Warcraft, came out with a update. And it was releasing a new dungeon with bosses and stuff in it. So, and what's interesting about this incident is that it led to a pandemic. So it would infect people across major cities. It would, even sometimes affect an entire server. So, yeah. So when people look at it in relation to COVID, they can see it have similarities, but when, like I say, in 2005, epidemiologists didn't think that this event was a good reflection of how people would react in a pandemic. And I just wanted to delve into these reasons. So yeah, if you're unfamiliar with the game, World of Warcraft, it's a online multiplayer, and you roleplay as a faction, either Alliance or Horde. And then within that faction, you pick a class to play as. And there's all kinds of classes, like you've got mage, hunter, warrior, priest, warlock. I think there's 8 different classes in the base game. So yeah, anyway, this update came with the dungeon, and dungeons are usually you've got these enemies who have quite a lot of health points, so you kind of need to work together as a team. So you go into a dungeon with 5 people, you'd have 3 DPS, a tank, and a healer. That's your typical dungeon. And they got to the final boss. And you would be fighting, obviously, this boss. So if you've made it that far into the dungeon, then you would be at the right level. A lot of dungeons are only for specific levels, so this would be a level 50 dungeon, so people who are leveled at the max would do it, as I understand it. So yeah, only the strongest people were accessing this dungeon, and it was kind of hyped because, like I say, it was a new dungeon with a new boss. So yeah, and often when you fight a boss, obviously you kind of throw spells, and you attack this thing, and there's certain ways to block spells. I believe some effects you can't combat, you just have to deal with it. And one of these debuffs, if you will, was a thing called Corupted Blood. And this is where it all starts. So this is a debuff that deals around 200 damage every second. So obviously the people in the dungeon could probably deal with it. It lasts 10 seconds in the instance. I believe. And obviously you'd have a healer who would heal you if needed. But yeah, unfortunately, due to an oversight, this debuff became way bigger than anyone could have predicted. And this is due to there being pets in the game. So some classes, like most notably hunters and warlocks, they would have combat pets, and you can use those pets to attack people in battle. And most classes can have, like, just a normal pet or whatever. So what would happen is these people bring their pets into the dungeon. And if you're a hunter or a warlock, then these pets are pretty useful to you. Like, I know hunters, a lot of your action bar is commanding your pet to do something. So that's pretty normal. And they would obviously use it to fight the final boss. And the debuff, Corrupted Blood, would accidentally affect the pets. I don't think you could tell that your pet was affected by it. As I understand it. I might be wrong. But when the battle was done, you would unsummon your pet, and your pet would just always have this debuff. So later on, when you would summon them outside of battle, outside of the battle or instance, this would go on to accidentally infect people. And this caused basically a plague, like a virtual plague in the game. And because of the nature of Corrupted Blood, it passes on to people who are nearby, even if you're allies. So if you were close by to people who are lower level, and if you're in a city, like Goldshire, for example, then you have, I think it's humans who start off in Goldshire. So yeah, you would pass it on to people who are new to the game and are like level 1. And they would die immediately, and it would also go to the non-playable characters, so people like who are innkeepers, quest givers, people who in the bank, you know, like they wouldn't die, but they could be infected. So these people were basically super spreaders, and just within hours, like, this plague raged havoc on the servers of World of Warcraft. And you can see the photos, like, if you type in Google, like, World of Warcraft Corrupted Blood, and then look at images, you can see, like, there's just skeletons, like, lining the roads and, like, buildings. Because of what happened. And this was a phenomenon because there's not very many examples of, like, a virus being simulated, right? So the people who had it, there was different types of reaction, and this is why some of the epidemiologists didn't think it was applicable to the real world until recently, because you had some people who would be healing others because a lot of people will have healing spells. Even though they would contract it themselves, they would heal people. And then there was also self-imposed quarantines, or like people just wouldn't play the game to not spread the virus further. And more interestingly, people were deliberately spreading the virus for a bit of funsies. And this is what kind of made people who study this case study like be kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Because obviously I don't think, or there hasn't been any cases of people who know they have COVID deliberately being like, okay, I'm gonna give it to them, and them. But there have been cases of people testing positive and know that they are positive to, like, go to places. Like, even if the intention isn't for them to spread it, there have been instances of, you know, people traveling and, like, interacting with people. And there was also people who don't take any precautions, because the advice in World of Warcraft was just kind of like, you know, stay away from the big cities or go on servers that aren't as densely populated. And also in the real world you have people who wear masks and when waiting for the vaccine or whatever. So there's some parallels in people obviously deliberately getting it and also not paying attention to the quarantine. Because like there were people who were higher levels who could just continue on with their lives because they could live, right? Whereas, and in real life, you know, some people don't wear masks and some people spread false information about what's in the vaccine and why coronavirus came about anyway. So there is a lot in common with these people and what happened. There are some parallels in the viruses themselves, i.e. they're both very infectious and both can be deadly to people who are vulnerable. But COVID obviously isn't 100% transmittable like Corrupted Blood. And this phenomenon actually like led to Blizzard doing another event with zombies in 2008. And you could become a zombie by being near a zombie, but it wasn't 100% certain that you would become a zombie. So COVID obviously it's not 100% infectious, and obviously the more things you do to protect yourself, the less likely you will get it. So yeah, that's the only real thing. In terms of the super spreaders, you can link those to people who don't know they have COVID. So, or they might get a false positive, right? No, not false. A false negative. So you could get COVID from someone, even if that person doesn't know they have it, because there's a lot of asymptomatic people who get COVID, right? So yeah, there's a lot of people who can give it to you, and in a lot of cases, one case can cause like an entire factory of like 100 people getting COVID, especially with the newer the newest strain that's going on in England, more and more people are getting infected because it's more infectious. So yeah, there's a lot of cases that are like kind of similar to this. I guess with swine flu, I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this, but swine flu, if you're unaware, was obviously a type of flu that was going around in 2009. And it's not as bad as COVID. Like, people weren't dying, or very little people died from it. I think a total of like 300 people died from the flu, compared to like however many people got it. Like, if I check real quick, like, how many people got swine flu in 2009? Okay, there were 60 million cases. Oh, and I was a bit off with the numbers. 12,000 deaths in the United States. So what that tells me is that because it wasn't deadly, and obviously there wasn't a vaccine, then people could just get it and be okay afterwards. But obviously there were still people who got it. But that's a lot of cases. 60 million. Like, that's a fifth of the US population off the top of my head. Like, that's a lot. So, and that kind of goes to show, like, I don't want to say it's like a precursor to COVID, but I think it definitely sets up how people were gonna deal with COVID, right? Because like I say, swine flu wasn't that bad. And people did the thing where they call it something that it isn't. Like, it says here that some people say it's the Mexican flu because the first case was in Mexico. Similarly, we call well, I don't. Some people call corona the quote-unquote Chinese virus. So yeah, a lot of countries had 50,000 confirmed cases, like the US, Mexico, Brazil, China, Russia, Australia, South Africa, Spain. And then the UK had 5,000 plus. Actually, I think Russia says 5,000 plus. Canada, Chile. Anyway, that's quite a lot of cases for a flu. And some studies say that the actual number of cases could have been as much as 1.4 billion people, because some of these cases would be mild or asymptomatic. And that's a lot of cases. So I think that kind of goes to show that COVID would have happened. Like, I don't know how much we can apply swine flu to COVID, because like I say, it's not as infectious and it's not as deadly. But I believe swine flu came from the Spanish flu, and obviously that was really, really bad for the time. And the response to Spanish flu was ridiculous. Like, we don't have confirmed numbers. Some people estimate there were 500 million cases and 100 million deaths. Like, That's an estimate of how bad Spanish flu was. And people were wearing masks. And people, I think there was mass burials. Yeah, in New Zealand there was the resting place of 1,122 men, women, and children in Auckland, New Zealand. Oh, and it killed a total of 8,500 New Zealanders. So, there's many cases in history that could have maybe told you how COVID was going to be managed. So I don't think it comes as any surprise that we're still dealing with it a year later. Especially because swine flu lasted like 18 months. Spanish flu lasted 2 years. You know, a pandemic does usually last 2 years. Like, even Ebola, that went on for like 2 years. And some people still get it. So, and obviously Ebola can be as much as a 90% mortality rate, which is a lot. 25 to 90% mortality rate. And in 2019, which was like a good few years after the first outbreak in 2016, it was still declared a health emergency because it was still affecting countries like Congo. I think all these cases just kind of go to show that as humans, we're naturally bad at dealing with viruses. And this isn't an attack on how we've dealt with it, although that does have a lot of play into it, like obviously how we deal with COVID or Ebola or anything really. Even naturally, I think it's in our nature to kind of deal with disease in a bad way, if that makes sense. Like, this isn't based on any research or anything, it's just a theory of mine where it's like, I think some of us are definitely hardwired to deliberately ignore a lot of signs that disease brings, or a lot of issues that it might bring as well. So, I don't think it comes to any surprise that back in the day, in the Middle Ages or the caveman era, that people would die of disease that is completely preventable today. Like, people die nowadays of preventable diseases because it's too expensive, especially if you're in the USA or in a country that doesn't have health insurance. You can die of diabetes, and you can also die of measles, mumps, or rubella because people don't vaccinate anymore. So there's a lot of questions that, like, why do we act this way? Why do we not just come together as humanity and all act in the same way and eradicate a disease, you know? So it's like, I can't answer that question. I don't know if we'll ever be able to answer that question, when the obvious answer is we can limit lives. Not limit. When we can actively save people by not doing something, like really passively, then why don't we do it? It's pretty easy to stay inside for a month. And then people will complain about money or whatever. And that's an entirely different rant of mine. You know, like, just why money is essentially the root of all evil, because it is. And money will go on to be the reason why people ignore quarantine or people ignore their own isolation. So, but I think even without money, people will just be like, oh, I'm sick of being inside. I just want to do things. Well, we all want to do things. If we had sorted this out within, like, the first 2 months of the pandemic, if we had action like New Zealand, we wouldn't be where we are in a second wave, or even going on to a third wave. So, there is a lot of questions of why some people just don't want to go along with whether it's a virtual virus or a real virus. I think it just comes down to us being bad at dealing with that stuff. Like, I just had a thought then about scam emails, or like those internet creepypastas where it's like, oh, if you don't send this chain letter, then you will see this person at 3 a.m. in your bedroom. Like, I think part of it is just fear, and we pass it on, so more people feel fear. And then part of it is just us being bad. Because humans are terrible at thinking things through. But yeah, I'll leave it there. If anyone wants to contribute to the discussion, I guess, about World of Warcraft, or about why people go against the greater good, I suppose. Like, if anyone has any thoughts or theories, I'll be happy to hear them. Make sure you hit me up on Twitter, which is eden_Twitch. That's probably the best way to get to me. But yeah, I think that's it. So yeah, thank you all for listening. This one was a bit depressing. But yeah, I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.